Hi, my name is Armin Alpert. I'm the current University Councillor. Our responsibility for the University Council is to either be informed of current processes and projects in the university, informed by the Executive Board, or to give the Executive Board advice on a number of different topics, but to also give consent on projects as well as budget plans. It is important for students to vote during the elections because elected students and staff members have a great power in distinguishing where our university is going to in the future, but we can also have a lot of influence of what is happening right now. As a councillor, you should be open-minded and be a good listener, but you also need to be able to make your point and also stand your ground if you see resistance.
Hello and welcome to the Maastricht University Council debates. I'm Den and I'm the Commissioner of Activities at Alles Drama, which is the university's own student theater association. Today we have 3 candidates who would all really like to be voted into the University Council. The council can do a lot for you as a student, so it's really important to make sure you make an informed decision on who you vote for. Now, for this debate we're going to follow the following structure. Each candidate will first tell the constituents a little bit about themselves and why they want to be a part of the University Council. For this purpose, they all have 60 seconds to do this. Then we also have these little signs. If one of your fellow debate partners is answering, you can show everyone whether you agree, are neutral, or disagree with what they are saying. And if you would ever like to interrupt someone and bring up your own points, please raise your hand and I will give you the turn to speak. Now it's time to introduce you to the first candidate. Sam, can you please tell us something about yourself?
Yeah, hello, I am Sam Schulpen. I am from LISLEX. A few major points that we wish to tackle over the next year, if the votes allow it, is mainly aimed at visibility and sustainability. It's a few points that we feel very much about. We believe there's a very big room to improve still. And yeah, that's the major points.
All right. And why do you want to be council for next year? And what motivated you to do this?
Well, in general, being in the council is of course very important. Students must be represented. I believe at least that I've been in the faculty council last year and I hope to bring this experience to the university council this year and hopefully bring a lot of good representation to the students and help them that way.
All right, thank you for sharing. Then we have our next candidates. Kritik, could you please tell me something about yourself?
Sure, Dan. Hi. So I'm Kritik, I'm from South India, I'm 22 years old, and I'm currently in my last year of the European Studies Bachelor at FASUS. I am the #1 candidate for Khan Party on the University Council list. And Khan Party, just to tell you where I align with Khan Party, is that we have an intense focus on sustainability, but also in the past years we focused a lot on measures tackling the housing crisis and what we can do as students at the University Council. And in addition to that, we've also looked a fair bit into mental health and the well-being of our students. This year, we intend to continue on the same path, as well as maybe an additional focus on sexual assault awareness.
All right, and out of those problems that you mentioned earlier, what do you think the biggest problem is that you want to help tackle as council member?
I think it's time that the University Council and I take a look at sexual assault awareness, just because we've seen 2 reports in the last 2 years about the situation in the Netherlands as well as at UM. And Khan Party itself is willing to look a little more into it than we have in previous years because our focus has been elsewhere.
Perfect. Then we are moving on to candidate number 3, Andrew.
Yeah, so my name is Andrew William Scrivener. I am an English student who grew up in Belgium. I study the Bachelor's European Studies. Unlike my co-debaters here, I don't have any experience in being on the University Council or even the Faculty Council. I'm a fresh face. But the main pillars of my party are housing, education, internationalism and sustainability, and it's what Novum has been focusing on for the past few years in the Council, trying to establish concrete measures regarding these topics to try to make the university better for students.
All right, and what makes you different from our previous candidates?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned, it is true I don't have the same experience to an extent. I'm a fresh face. I'm 20. I'm the youngest here. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think in the university council, you want, at the end of the day, you're there to be representing students.
Your time is running a little low, just so you know.
Adequate representation involves all kinds of different profiles within the council, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you. All right, from now on we are going to move forward to the first general question, which will be about housing, and we have a clip about this topic.
For people coming here, it's always a big struggle because there's not much available and you have to be really lucky to find something affordable.
So we can't actually find anything on the market, and maybe we will live in the shelter next year.
I've also had to have one of my friends sleep on my couch for a week or two just because he couldn't find a house once he moved into the Netherlands.
So yeah, there's a lot of problems going on with housing. I'd like to give the first question to Sam. What has your party achieved in the past to help students find housing?
Past few years we have communicated with university the need for housing. I mean, it's a basic necessity for studying here, of course. And the housing problem has become somewhat better from previous years, but it's still far from optimal. I mean, it's still very hard for students to get housing. And I mean, we're continuing to look at new ways to incentivize the university to take an active role, but it's easier said than done. But I do believe that it's a fight worth fighting.
Kritik, what do you have to add to this question?
To answer the same question from the perspective of someone who has also been a board member of Khan Party in previous years, one of our proudest achievements in recent times is a project called SOS Maastricht. So SOS Maastricht stands for Save Our Students Maastricht, and it was a platform that was launched by 3 of our former university council members who actually, by doing this, they were able to link those who had a free couch, a free bed, a free room with those who needed urgently a space to stay in Maastricht. And it was a fairly, I'd call it a success to a certain extent, because we patched up over 100 people with temporary solutions and found 33 students permanent solutions. And it was successful to the extent where Maastricht Housing has taken over the project. And in fact, the 3 students who began it were awarded the Student Award last year.
Then Andrew, what has your party achieved?
Well, housing is obviously an absolutely crucial issue for students in Maastricht. What my party worked hard on last year was in fact helping the university collaborate with hotels and different short-term housing, even boats, as a method to create a short-term option for students who have not yet found housing. What we want to do in the future is that the university have platforms like Maastricht Housing, like the Guest House, that do exist, and they're quite easy to use, they're fairly affordable. The problem is the capacity is very low. So one big thing that we'll be pushing for in the council next year is let's get the university to invest more money, buy more buildings, expand the Guest House so the university has the capacity to accommodate for its growing student population.
Then I have a question for Lex. What are your long-term goals when it comes to finding housing for the students?
The student numbers keep on growing with our university, so I think the best ideal solution on long term would be is establishing some kind of program which continuously looks into the housing problem in general, because it's not going to be solved over just 3 years. It's going to keep being a thing, if not get worse, you know. So it would definitely be worth looking into some kind of organ or some kind of institution within our university that can evaluate the housing needs of our students as well as the incoming students and accommodate that in some way, either by working with the municipality to buy new buildings or buy new complexes, or fix temporary solutions for the time being. But of course we wish to emphasize that the longer term solutions should be just creating more and more student housing space, affordable housing space, of course.
And what does that Lex do for temporary housing? Because I completely understand that obviously long-term plans do take longer, but what concrete steps are you taking for the short term?
I mean, you can look with the university, for example, into the hotels, for example. I mean, there have been student hotels that have been popping up. I mean, looking into contacting those, making partnerships with those kind of people, trying to at least find temporary accommodation until you can get someone settled into permanent accommodation. And then, of course, longer term, you're looking into perhaps building new residents, like building new buildings just specifically for student housing, or finding new buildings that can be bought.
Okay, and then I'd like to ask Andrew, what has your party been doing for housing in comparison to what Lex has been doing?
Well, I mean, naturally, the effort coming from within the councils is always generally a concerted effort.
Yeah.
And that's something we have to look into as candidates ourselves. It's, if elected, if all goes well,
Yeah.
we need to work on this sort of thing together. The emphasis on short-term housing is absolutely crucial, and I completely agree. And Novum have always been pushing for alternatives and a way to keep roofs over the heads of the students.
Yes.
Because we truly feel it is the university's responsibility to make sure its students are well looked after and are safe. When we look at what issues are right now, it could be so much better. For example, there's 80 empty units in the Randwick facilities as of right now
Okay.
that aren't filled. Those have to be filled, whether that's at a discounted price or the university actually looking for students who don't have accommodation right now,
Yeah.
or who are living in Germany or Belgium ages away. There are concrete measures we can take, and we plan to take them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then for Khan, what plans do you have for the upcoming year when it comes to housing?
I think it's a perfect segue, moving on from what Andrew just said, and I applaud you for bringing that up, because it's true. There are these units that aren't occupied, and as a matter of fact, there have been discussions, per se, at the municipal level, whereas there's concern over the fact that the municipality and the university collaborated on so spontaneously pushing for the construction of these units.
Could I ask which specific candidates you worked with in the municipality?
Yes, you can. I was a little hesitant because it might not have been my place to share. But so Alexander Lurbrink, he is a former municipal councillor. But then we've had plenty of discussions with him over the past 2 years, because he also sort of had the first initiative amongst municipal councillors at the time to set up a town hall with all these students who were facing issues and, in fact, discriminatory practices from landlords.
Yeah.
And set up this town hall so that the mayor of Maastricht could actually speak to them and get to know the situation on the ground.
Yeah.
And if I may come back to answering your question, what Khan Party will do in the coming year is actually to sort of raise awareness and the visibility of these units that aren't being occupied right now, and also point out that it's something structural, in that when students first come to Maastricht, and I say this as someone who's coming from outside the EU and gets this information package of what can you expect,
Yeah.
which is fairly helpful, but it doesn't point out the fact, certain details like Maastricht housing favors those who have had an account for a few more years. I understand this sort of affirmative action thinking behind it, but I think it might be time to rethink things like that, and also to maybe put forward Khan Party's long-term view on housing. It's identifiable that Europe as a whole, or universities around Europe, don't have the same sort of culture around providing housing as universities in the US or UK, for example, whereas on-campus housing is sort of a given.
Yeah.
And a lot of places around Europe, it's private companies who can be depended upon to have housing complexes in every student city, which I think we can attempt to push for here in Maastricht, because maybe the university isn't in such a close collaboration with private firms such as Zior Housing.
Yeah. All right. So for Novum, I heard that you also brought up the point of the empty units in Randwick. Did you also work with the municipality on this?
So Novum have long emphasised the need, and have naturally been collaborating with the municipality, because, I mean, especially when it comes to an issue like housing, how can you really tackle anything if you don't? What I must also mention is, as I've said, I am a fresh face. I've not been involved in Novum that long.
Yeah.
If I was to receive a question like which municipal councillors, I would have no idea. I would
That's
have no
fair.
idea. But I know they have. So I'd like to ask, both of you really, are you aware of, and what are your plans regarding free, legal and tenant right advice that comes from the university or sort of public institutions when it comes to the protection of tenant rights for students? Because I think it's an incredibly important issue. You have these 19, 20, 21-year-olds, 18-year-olds who are signing contracts and getting involved in things with private landlords.
Yeah.
And their rights can very easily be marched upon. So I'd like your thoughts on what we can do to protect them and what current frameworks exist to do so.
Do you want to go first, or?
Sure. Thank you. So one of these frameworks that exists is actually an NGO called the Team Zuidlenburg, and they do provide free legal advice on tenant rights in most cases, and it's usually, most of their work, at least in the last 2 years, has focused on the overpricing of units in accommodation that is being rented out on student permits. But then they are capable of providing advice on other legal rights as well. I am slightly, I do have to admit that I can't tell you about the workload that it might put on the university if the university attempted to provide this sort of legal advice on its own. But it's something that we, if elected, should look into next year.
All right, thank you. Also, I just want to remind you all that you can use your signs at any point.
Yes, thank you.
Please do.
Of course, to answer your question, to my knowing, there is currently a student initiative that is aimed at giving legal advice by students to students. I can't remember the name because it's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't recite the name. But it's a team of students studying law from various levels that try at least help with the basic problems that students encounter. I think the main thing that could help, however, is perhaps working with the university to promote that more and working to support those people more and perhaps expand the team to meet the capacity.
And what do you mean by working with the university? What kind of actions would that entail?
I mean, short term, you can say promotion. I mean, just making it clear, like, hey, this team of students is here ready to help you with answering the basic questions about rent, for example. They might not always be able to answer you fully, but then they'll probably be able to refer you to someone who can. On the longer term, of course, you can look into perhaps supporting them in different ways, like connecting them within the university so they can reach certain people within the university that might be able to aid with this as well. And of course, trying to support their expansion, for example, just making it attractive, for example, as an extracurricular activity for students that have the correct study fields to help such people. I believe that would be a nice thing for both extracurricular activities as well as helping our fellow students.
That sounds very good. Thank you. We will close off this discussion here and we'll move on to the next topic, which is internationalization. Got another video to show you here.
Maastricht University has a very large number of international students here. So if the government limits the number of students, I think like for the requirements to get into the university will be higher, and many like students cannot come to Maastricht to study or even come to the Netherlands. So maybe, I think maybe the university should do something to like change or take some action for that.
All right, so my question for the parties on this topic is, if you were elected, how would you integrate the existing international students and how would you safeguard the access to education for the Dutch and international students alike?
I mean, I'm happy to go first.
Then please, the floor is yours.
So, I mean, when it comes to internationalism, I think the university really does promote itself as being the European university, the international university of the Netherlands. And that's something that I think is what makes this university so special. So that's something we have to protect at all costs. To me, a good way to close the gap that does exist between Dutch students and international students, because it is there and it's a real shame.
Yeah.
Would be to rebalance the funding between Dutch student associations and international student associations. On average, Dutch student associations do receive more funding than international ones do. And I think if those ballots or budgets were rebalanced, I'm not talking, drastic action like, the same budget for everyone, because obviously there are different factors like private funding that come into play. But if we could give these student associations on the international side a little more funding,
Yeah.
what you would then have would be international student associations, which are more, better marketed, more seen by the university population, can organize cooler events, can cater to more members.
Mm-hmm.
And what would you have as a result is not only would more international students be willing to join these student associations, you also would offer a better alternative to Dutch student associations for new Dutch students coming in. Because the point is, you don't want to have Dutch student associations and international student associations.
Mm-hmm.
Realistically, what you want is to have hybrid student associations
Yeah.
that provide a good service for their members.
Yes.
But like most things, that starts with the funding.
That's true. Now, the Dutch Prime Minister released a statement where he said that he would like to make learning the Dutch language mandatory for all international students. What does your party think about this?
What do my party think about this? We are completely against that. I think a huge part of what makes Maastricht so special, again, is the international element. And I think the fact that generally a lot of courses are in English and you don't have to speak Dutch to come here is one of the best elements about being here. I mean, look at this. This is a debate for the University Council, right? And we're doing this in English.
That's true.
This is an international university and it should remain that way. And so on the University Council, within the parties itself, through open letters, talking to the government, talking to the municipality, we need to protect the English-speaking sort of almost tradition of this university as hard as possible.
All right, thank you. Then, yes, I actually have a question for Lex. How do you think about this?
Oh, yeah, that's great. I wanted to respond to the same question.
Perfect.
I think this has also recently come up within the faculty, and I assume also the University Council, because, of course, the national debate that is currently ongoing in general. The stance of Lex is really that it should not be mandatory for people to learn Dutch. We have a lot of studies within our university that are aimed at international affairs. I mean, you have European studies, global studies, international law, European Law School, etc. Those are all aimed at the international world, and in the international world you speak English, you don't speak Dutch, sadly. Of course, it is still a vital skill to know Dutch if you want to live here. That's why we would emphasize that instead of making it mandatory, that people are offered Dutch courses in general. I mean, enabling a student to learn Dutch on their own is way better than forcing them to. And it also makes sense, in my opinion. But yeah.
Okay, and how do you think you would encourage the university, or maybe on a bigger scale, to also encourage students to learn Dutch but not have it be completely mandatory?
I mean, the first thing, of course, would be capacity. I mean, at the moment, there's just no capacity for people who even want to learn the Dutch language courses. I mean, there has been a quite extensive history of people just not being able to enter into the program, or only being able to enter into the wrong program. I think it starts off with actually making sure that there's enough capacity for those courses, that people can actually take them. And then afterwards, we can look into promoting it, if you want to perhaps start a career within the Netherlands, here are some language courses for your specific profession, for example, or just the basics. And I think a lot of students within our university are also they want to learn Dutch, but they can't because there's just no facilities at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I would like to close off the discussion here. We will move on to the next topic, which will be education.
Some of the courses I've taken, their success was based on tutors. I've had courses where I've had amazing tutors who knew a lot and could really convey all information very well, but I've had other courses where I haven't been so lucky with my tutors, and where I felt as though some of my peers had a little bit more success just based on their tutor's ability to convey knowledge. That is a huge problem, actually.
There's not information about the courses that students will be taking next year. This is also true for some of the master's degree that I have been looking at times confusing, and as I said, the information is simply insufficient, and it seems quite messy and outdated.
heard in the video earlier that people are really dependent on their tutors and how well the tutors can actually teach them. Do you have any plans on how you could improve the general quality of a tutor?
Yeah, sure. The general quality of a tutor, the easiest way that a university as an organization can regulate this, of course, is with the trainings that these tutors, teaching fellows or professors take when they first begin the academic year or when they first begin their career at Maastricht University. And I am, not in the know sufficiently to tell you whether or not that is a good training. But I think more so how we would tackle this aspect in the future is something that's a more consistent check into the quality. Of course, we have the EBO surveys that students are expected to submit at the end of each course, which have, they're kind of up and down with the response rates. But I trust in the education program committees of each program, from what I see at least, that they work on those response rates. And I think more so than just keeping track of the quality of these tutors or the quality of education in each course, we could look at the overall quality of a student's academic year. Because once people realize that each course is really playing into the next and the following one, in terms of the student's thinking, I think people will start to realize the different avenues in which a tutor can have an impact on that.
All right. And then for Novum, do you have any plans to improve the education of the tutors? Do you have anything?
So when it comes to, the education of the tutors, again, we do have to look at the training programs they have. One thing of particular emphasis for Novum is not specifically the training of tutors when it comes to academic competence, which obviously is incredibly important, but it's also making sure the tutors know how to behave when it comes to things like sexual harassment and sexual assault, and making sure that that is dead clear and that they know exactly where the line is. Because again, that is a massive issue that I'm very, very glad covered in their introduction, because it's something that the university needs to work on and implement. But again, when it comes to training programs for tutors' academic competence, obviously the feedback you can give at the end of a course is always going to be extremely useful. So tutors have to do a better job, but at least in my faculty, they do a good job as well of making students fill those up. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. You brought up the topic of sexual harassment, which has obviously been a very alive topic the past year. Do your parties have any concrete measures to tackle this sexual harassment issue?
I think in general, I think everyone in society in general is becoming more aware of the topic and the problem that has existed for such a long time. I think the main things we can do within our university itself is offer the appropriate resources and support for those affected, and making sure that we have able bodies within our university that are able to take action against those that show such behaviors, because it's unacceptable. Should be pretty well known, but we have to show by means of making sure the institutions are there to support the victims, as well as make sure that those who did transgress the lines are brought to justice, at least from what we can do as a university.
You talked about the able bodies, that would help people.
Yes.
How do you see that working out concretely? Like what kind of people would they be?
Of course. So I am pretty sure that every single faculty / the university in general has a specific committee for these kinds of transgressions. So it is a committee, to my knowing, which has both students and staff members who look into complaints filed against staff members, and those range from sexual to normal. But there is a specific committee specifically designated for sexual misconduct, from what I know. And I believe just enabling these bodies, making sure that there's enough promotion out there for those victims that are out there, give them a sign that they can come forward and that they're supported, and actions will be taken against those who have shown such misconduct.
That's a very good point. However, it seems that this council has kind of failed in that regard, as they recently asked a perpetrator of sexual harassment to have a mediation session with their victim. So, you know, this is obviously a very precocious situation for someone to be in.
Yeah.
How would you make sure that something like this doesn't happen, or how would you improve upon this?
I mean, in general, the prevention of these kinds of misconducts, I mean, it is somewhat hard. I mean, we have laid out the rules, and I think we're showing signs as both a society as well as a university, or at least we should, that these kinds of actions are unacceptable, both criminally as well as within our society. I think we need to keep sending that message and making clear to everyone, students, staff, everyone in society, that these kinds of actions are just inexplicable and unaccepted within our society. We need to start emphasizing that and supporting whoever is affected. And I think I don't know the specifics of this case, so I wouldn't be able to comment on it, to be honest.
Okay. Andrew, I saw you raised your hand earlier. What would you like to bring into this conversation?
Well, you asked about concrete measures when it comes
Yes.
to sexual harassment and sexual violence within the university. I know from my own experience as a European Studies student in FASOS
Yeah.
that in your first year, and I don't actually know if this is university-wide, but I think it should be,
Yeah.
you have what you call a mentor program, which is a course worth 1 or 2 credits. You meet once a month, and you, along with other students, you get followed along as your first year goes by to make sure everything's going okay and to know if you have any complaints and etc. I think that's a fantastic platform to integrate sexual harassment and sexual violence education into it, because it's not just the staff, it's also the students, which is a huge problem. But if we had university-wide for first years a mentorship program which was worth 1 or 2 credits, which students would attend.
Could you move closer to the microphone?
Yeah. That would happen about once a month. Through that, you could integrate training and education on sexual harassment and sexual violence at university-wide through all students in their first year.
All right, thank you. Kan, do you have anything to add?
So, firstly,
What were you writing earlier? Because you've been taking very nice notes.
thank you. My handwriting's terrible. Not so. Maybe the notes will speak for themselves. I mean, the last thing that I wrote actually pertains to the mentor program, because what I've noticed is that it's administered quite inconsistently amongst programs. And in some programs, I have friends that really still do depend on their mentor up until the 3rd year, which isn't the case beyond the 1st year for us in European studies. And where I see us being able to act on not just maybe ensuring the consistent administration of the mentor program is that we can provide all staff, with the sensitivity trainings in terms of how do you react if you're approached by someone who is attempting to confide in you. And from in my knowledge, this hasn't been the case previously, so that's sort of an easy first step that I think any party would understandably take if elected at this point. And beyond that, I also want to talk about general consent as well as sexual assault awareness courses that are mandatory in your first year. In a lot of universities, in your introduction week in your first year, you do get a lot of these social safety courses. And it's a bit of a wonder that Maastricht University, despite its, I would say, a fair progressiveness, hasn't implemented something like that yet.
Do any of you have anything to add? Because I saw you both raised your agree sign.
Of course, the mentorship program is for these kinds of things is very important. But generally, like just settling into Maastricht, it can be very helpful, I think.
Yeah.
But no, I have to say I'm very glad that especially Khan. I mean, I think the points we made weren't that dissimilar, and I think it's good that there's a common sort of understanding here, because that's where we can start to actually make some change.
Absolutely. Our next topic will be accessibility, and we have another video for this.
I think as a disabled student in Maastricht, it's really hard to get accommodations. Yes, that is the job of the disability office, but at the same time, it does feel like there is an excessive amount of hurdles that are put upon students, especially disabled students, to get those accommodations. Getting an accommodation should not be hard. Someone who does need an accommodation should not be putting extra or an excessive amount of work into getting those accommodations. The disability office has become something like a feared place of disabled students. I personally, but also other students and friends of mine, have been discriminated against by the disability office, but there's no platform for us. There is no one representing us, no one speaking for us, or no one speaking up for us. This is a fight that we have all been fighting individually, and that we're slowly, I think, starting to understand that we're not alone in. There's been 3 different categories of discrimination. First, discrimination of students who just didn't know any better. And then the 2 other categories would be one from teaching staff and the other one from administrative staff. I do personally study at FHML. For example, being asked by professors to write an extra assignment on how I, as a disabled person, can be a good medical professional. And to justify myself and my choice of study, which clearly is ableist. But also, for example, from the disability office, not being granted accommodations till clear, severe documents have been shown, for it to take weeks to get responses in situations that are urgent. As a disabled person with chronic illnesses, that is impossible. So yeah, that's been really frustrating. Diversity in the sense of disability, I think I've seen in none of the programs. Correct me if I'm wrong, one program. But yeah, it's not a topic that openly gets talked about, and to be honest, considering how big of a problem it is, I would love to see plans and people just be mad about what is happening to their peers on a daily basis. If it is only in one program, what the fuck is everyone else doing?
So this is a very sad account of a disabled student of the university. My question is for all parties. When you see a situation like what this student has described in this video, how would your party take actions to address this and to hopefully improve so that something like this does not happen again?
Yeah, I think in general, and it's just in general, it is important for the representatives within the University Council to keep in touch with their actual base, if not just the students in general. I mean, it is important to start conversations with these kind of people, to see how you can help them.
Yeah.
I think the first, of course, is identifying that there is a problem, which can easily be done by just having a conversation with that person, and then looking at what can you do as a University Council member to address such situations. I mean, of course, we can't do everything, but we can at least try, you know? I think, especially with disabled needs at the moment, I mean, all the faculty should be friendly towards these kinds of things. And it's highly inappropriate, of course, that a professor asks someone to write an essay on how they can accomplish their goals as a medical professional while being disabled. It's ridiculous, you know. These kinds of things should not be happening within our university. And perhaps the university should send out a signal to the staff that this is just not acceptable.
Yeah. So the student has described that there was one program that did bring sort of awareness to this. So it seems like this has been an issue that has been ongoing for a bit. Has your party done anything concrete for this issue?
I mean, I don't know the specifics, of course, of what has been done, but at least listening to these kinds of problems, these should be addressed as soon as possible. I mean, it's just unacceptable that these kinds of things happen. And I would, at least, if I were a council member at the moment, I would definitely just try and get this to the appropriate persons or bodies within our university to try and discuss what the hell is going on. Yeah.
Okay. And what kind of points do you think you would bring up?
I mean, has been said, the conduct by teaching staff. I mean, this is the most basic thing. They should just take into account, of course, that a person is disabled and they should be treated equal to any other person. The other thing is, of course, accessibility to in general. I mean, they should be able to navigate through the buildings and actually get to their classes. And if not, the university or faculty should take appropriate measures to make sure that they can get to their classes. And of course, the last and final thing was the housing thing, I believe. I mean, in general, we should talk with Maastricht Housing on how this could be a problem. I mean, it should not be the disabled person should not be the person that has to do 300 forms to prove that they're disabled.
Yeah.
I mean, they should be helping them, aiding them in the process, and trying to get them accommodation as quickly as possible.
All right, thank you for your answer. Now, for Novum.
Yeah. Actually, I had a question for the candidate from List Lex.
Yes.
You did make the point that you felt disabled students should be treated equally.
Yep.
Now, when that comes to how they're regarded and how they're treated when it comes to their academic life, I completely agree. I'll give you a very, very big green smile on that one. But I think the entire point is, and I'm putting out the red smile for this, when it comes to facility infrastructure, we don't want them treated equally. And I know that's a tagline and it sounds much more drastic than I mean it.
Yeah.
But it means we do have to make special accommodations for people with disabilities, whether those are physical or whether those are more mental, invisible disabilities. Novum has a very, very, very particular stance on, excuse me, on helping people with invisible disabilities, whether that's ADHD, dyslexia, anything like that, or whether that's solid mental health issues.
Yeah.
For example, yes, we want to make education more accessible for people like that, make it easier for them to live life as a regular student, but also acknowledge it.
Yeah.
But a big thing as well is with mental health issues, we need the psychologists to answer quicker.
Yeah.
We need them to answer quicker, and we need more of them. Because the equivalent reaction time that the sort of psychologists have right now is sort of the same as me calling an ambulance and being told to wait 4 to 5 business days.
Yes.
In a lot of cases, these are emergencies, and the university needs to be well prepared to deal with them.
Yeah. All right, thank you. And then for Khan, do you have anything to add to this discussion?
Yeah, I do. I want to first bring up how incongruous it is as a university to give a platform to the network of disabled students and staff members with disabilities that's unlimited, and yet to have professors who can ask questions like this. So once again, it points back to the training that they get, but I think there's a special actor in this case when it comes to who's best equipped to train and sort of have an overview of staff and how they treat students with disabilities. And that I'm kind of blessed to hold a pen from them right now, but it's the Diversity and Inclusivity Office. So they're just going to end their 5-year mandate since they were opened. And I got to point out, they're a small team of staff and students that really need, and they've been working on this intensely, I can tell you from experience, that they want to increase engagement with the student population at UM. And by doing so, if we as students do so, for example, what I do is I have notifications on for every time they post on Instagram. And what that does is signal importance to the rest of the university. All right, listen to the Diversity and Inclusivity Office, because they seem to be, I say they seem to be, they are the experts on how do you best write them, or how do you best include diverse groups into the policy of the university. And in terms of, lastly, I'll speak about the awareness, which is still obviously an issue, because where there's smoke, there's fire, and where there's unruly comments and treatment of students with disabilities, it means there's a lack of awareness. And I think what we as university councillors could do, or even faculty councillors, is it's about letting them tell their own story in their own way. At the end of the day, we're there as representatives. And we have really got to make sure that we are inviting them into all the discussions which are related to maybe redesigning a part of a faculty to make it more accessible. They've got to be a part of the discussion.
All right, thank you very much. We'll close off the discussion here. We'll move on to our next topic, which is student well-being.
Also recently there was this kerfuffle about a person who got sexually assaulted by a member of the staff, and then there was a whole scandal behind it. And I think that it's essentially showed that the guidelines that have been set by UM simply the point of going to the board of examiners and asking to not take an exam with that person who actually sexually assaulted you then, so they don't actually follow their own rules.
That the workload is sometimes a lot, and then they, I don't know if expect is the right word, but to do extracurriculars, and I don't feel like that's really an option.
Especially from my point of view, at the law faculty, the workload is sometimes very heavy, especially with the fact that the law faculty doesn't have any reflection week. And throughout the year, there is just no time, for example, for students to actively work on their mental health or to get some time to recharge.
Well, particularly, I did like how there was handling of, for example, like taking a leave of absence when mental health, for example, was something that I struggled with. I did have to apply various times to the disability center, and it took a very long time for them to respond. But I was approached in the end. I did try, but they did refer me to some doctors that I could see, but it was not very. The list was very extensive, and a lot of them did not provide care for new patients. So it did not help. I had to look for help by myself.
I think Novum has already said this before. The basis starts with that there's enough psychologists ready for students.
Yeah.
Because that's, it's a base necessity in these kinds of cases. As has been referred to previously, there can be emergencies where people just need they need to be talking to a person, and those persons are not available, or they are, as been said, have to wait 5 days, and that's just not acceptable. And other things are also the general facilities that are given to students in general. There are certain faculties which have way more facilities than others, and of course that is a little bit weird, of course, because you would expect that at least all the faculties have a little bit of similar facilities. Some faculties will be, of course, bigger than others, but it can't be that, for example, seeing a study advisor in one faculty will take a month, and in the other faculty it will take 1 day.
Yeah. So what are some concrete measures that you would take to?
For example, as has been said, hiring more psychologists, expanding that office, but also expanding the resource, for example, study advisors, or those kinds of people that you can just talk to, that you can resolve your problems with, whether that be educational or personal.
Okay, and there seems to be a lot of difficulty with the communication of SETS services, that it's kind of vague to find or hard to find. How would you improve the accessibility and the communication of this information?
Yeah, as been said before, if you go, for example, of a mentor program, for example, when people come into our university, they can just be told by their mentor.
Can you please explain to us how the mental program helps? How is it supposed to help?
Mental program helps. Making them aware of their possible needs, showing them the possible facilities that our university offers to help them, and I think those 2 points mainly, making them recognize, if not themselves, having professional help be there to recognize it and help them further. And of course, making sure that if you actually need help, for example, by a psychologist or a study advisor, that those people are actually ready for you and ready to help and available. That's the main thing.
I see. All right. How would Novum tackle things? Would they do it any different? Would they do it similar?
Well, I think that the candidate from Listlex essentially, luckily mentioned it, but listed off most of our policies. I think that there's a reason that most of the points that Novum has, getting more psychologists and dealing with invisible disabilities, and when it comes to the care of the students, there's a reason most of them have been mentioned already. It's because the care of the students is something that has to be discussed when it comes to all other topics in the university, whether that's education, internationalism, or housing. It's the priority, and I think it's our job as representatives and as candidates for university council. Again, we're representatives for the students who vote, and even the ones who don't.
Absolutely.
We're there for everyone, and that mainly starts with, yes, we can work on housing, and yes, we can work on more practical educational issues, but the first thing is we need to make sure our students are taken care of. And so that's why things like psychologists and stuff like that have been mentioned by me, but also by Listlex, and I'm sure Khan has comments like that too.
Yes, so we'll move on to Khan.
On that exact topic, yes, Khan does. And in fact, I myself have been attempting to work on it both at the faculty council level as well as the university council level this past year. And I want to bring out, sorry to be a bit anecdotal about it, but I think the harshest thing that can happen to someone who is seeking help is that they don't find a place, or they don't know what their options are where they can go and be heard, but also treated with respect and sensitivity. And in relation to that, I want to talk about an initiative that was put up, and actually it's in most bathrooms around now. It's the Are You OK QR code. So this was launched by the FASO student representatives, and a lot of them who took part in launching this were actually faculty council members from Novum and Khan who worked together on it. And the current sort of issue in how it's gone, because it's out of their hands now, and it's actually under the Student Services Center.
Okay.
And what we've heard recently, and the deficiency here is that we didn't hear about it on time, but a lot of what is on this QR code, once people scan it, it seems to be diluted with information, and it's just one large mess, which doesn't clearly allow people who are looking to it for help.
Yeah, because you mentioned that it's kind of going through the Student Services Center, but I mean, I think we can all agree that this is a topic that is important for every single student to know. So how would you make sure that it's accessible for even people who would never be in contact with the Student Services Center? How would you make it more of a main topic?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we're students at an educational institution, and the first sort of venue where we see things like diversity, sustainability, mental health awareness, or well-being in general is in our education. And I say this because, like we saw in the video, there was the mention of reflection weeks, for example, or you mentioned shorter academic years, which isn't currently the case at I can tell you from my experience as on the faculty council that it's quite unanimous that students and staff really do benefit from the reflection weeks. And I think it's certainly worth pushing to make this a wide initiative. And in addition to that, the shorter academic years, there's actually a national, I wouldn't call it a policy, but an initiative to shorten the academic year. And at the sort of pilot faculty that's doing this is FASOS, wherein 3 out of the 4 programs at FASOS, bachelor programs that is, don't have the 6th period.
Yeah.
And so this too is something that has received quite positive feedback, and I think it's worth pushing forward, specifically by engaging with the education program committees on how do you feasibly implement cutting out a 6th period for programs across without compromising on the quality of the education.
In general, I believe that giving students a little bit of more of a break would definitely help on a mental health.
And how would you make it more efficient for the students then? Because I can understand.
I mean, of course, I can't talk specifics because every course is different. I think it is very important that the program committees for each course, of course, look into specific topics that can be perhaps made efficient. And I mean, I think the basic thing is that sometimes.
What do you mean by that? How to make it more basic?
For example, if a course currently consists of a few courses which can be perhaps merged into one course with the same information and not the same amount of time, but just the same information. I think here and there are still certain classes or certain weeks that you will just have education which is just fairly short, for example, or just easily combinable with another course on another day. I think looking at those kind of things with the program committees, the faculty councils and the university councils can definitely offer solutions to both make it efficient as well as giving students a break.
Okay, thank you. Novum, what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, I am a beneficiary of the 5-period system, being a European Studies student. And I think it is utterly fantastic.
Okay.
And I think this should be implemented university-wide, and they have largely covered that, especially from a mental health standpoint. Having that time to recharge is fantastic. One thing that does also allow, that I did want to bring into the conversation, is internship opportunities. A lot of students, at the end of the day, are here because they're trying to better themselves, become a more competent individual, and eventually go on to a career. A big part of that is doing internships. unfortunately, a lot of internships, whether it's in the business field, the policy field, the law field, are a minimum of 2 or 3 months. With this 5-period system, that enables students to have more time to attend internships over the summer and build themselves up, learn, come back as more competent students, and therefore have better prospects coming later in life. Whereas if you've only realistically got a month and a half of a summer break, it's very hard to find anyone who's going to take you on.
Yeah. Okay. I would like to leave this discussion point here, and then we will move on to the last topic, which is representation.
One thing that I would say is opening the communication between the higher ups in the university and then also the students as well. I do feel like there's a lot of times very limited conversations, and as well in the place where I study, I feel that there is sometimes a breach or a gap between the students and the higher ups as well. And I feel like decreasing the gap would make communication of like very important topics way more understandable, and them being more reachable, I think, is another important concept that we should need to have in the university.
There are a lot of things that students are unaware that the University Council could be addressing, and I think there need to be more efforts taken to getting the student body more interested in that. If we look at the voter turnouts last year across the board, it was less than 20%, and also throughout the reportings that we have now been doing and the research for the student election, it becomes apparent that the council is only something that's really talked about in spring in the run-up of the elections, but then after it dies down, students are unaware of the rights and privileges they get by having a student representative and what those can actually achieve.
All right, so our first question is for Lex, because in your election program, you do mention that visibility is very important for you. Only we have seen that you really post mostly during the election season, and otherwise there's kind of a silence. What do you have to say about this?
I mean, we have been, over the past year, because in the Faculty Council as well, we've been trying to address the student, and not the student participation and, of course, the visibility of the council. And I think one of the major problems that we ran into is, for example, like nobody actually has a clue what the councils do.
Yeah.
And if they do, they don't know who their representatives are, which is a very...
how do you know that people don't really know that, what the councils do for students?
I mean, you see it often in the run-up, for example, when parties start recruiting for members, that you have to very often explain what the actual councils actually do. I think one of the problems is, of course, our visibility is a little different, I think. We chose an approach which...
Wouldn't it be a good thing to, well, of course, promote your visibility a bit more by being more active on social media, because, you know, of course, students...
So we elected over the previous year to do it more in person.
Okay.
We have held things like general student assemblies where we invite the students of the faculty to come in and render their opinions on certain topics that are of importance at that moment. I think a different thing is what we are working on within the Faculty Council at the moment is just making a unified thing. It should not be one party's goal to be visible. It should be all the representatives in general. So we've been working with the board to try and find solutions, and we will continue to do so.
Yeah, isn't it a bit strange then that the students themselves are responsible for kind of seeking out this information, while, you know, as you say, like the councils are really important for the students. So wouldn't it be a better idea to really spread the message a bit more and not have the students have to go after all of this information to even find out?
Sure. And to that extent, of course, we've already as listed a few other options. I mean, we have one of the major two things that I would say is we want to start publishing all the agendas of the Faculty Council, make them public so that students actually know what is going on within the councils and know whether they perhaps have an opinion on such topics, as well as making the meetings public. Some people don't know this, but all the meetings are technically public. But there's zero communications on where those meetings are being held, so people don't know where they should be going in such situations. And of course, there's also like the general thing, as been said before, the council in general should seek to open a line of communications with the student, whether that be an email, for example, or a form.
Well, in that case, because it is
Yeah.
important that students know that the debates
Yeah.
are able to be accessed. Do you post about them? Like, do council's members post about them on social media, or, like you said, send emails
Yeah.
so people are aware of
So
that they can
what
watch
has
these
been
debates?
envisioned with the agenda, for example, I mean, we get a weekly email from the university news. I mean, it can be easily incorporated in like, hey, this is the faculty stuff going on within the faculty mail, and then in the university mail, it can be like, oh, this is going on within our university.
Yeah.
As well, of course, as perhaps opening like a contact form for representatives where they can just see perhaps an email box where people can just email their complaints or their troubles or perhaps even ideas, and then members can approach them. Or perhaps also just publishing, I mean, that is of course dependent on how things go, but just meeting them in person, setting up meetings one way or the other. I think those, in general, I mean, it's all small kind of things, but together they do kind of improve the visibility. And of course, we need to keep looking on ways that we can continue to improve the visibility.
Absolutely. Yeah. I saw, Khan, you agreed with the previous statement that was made. I would like to ask you, what are you doing to represent the students and to make sure that this representation stays visible for the students?
So, I mean, firstly, I want to talk about what I do or what a lot of us do at the level of the individual, which is really leaning into the fact that we're not just council members when we're in those meetings, we're also council members at other points of time, and we really should put the effort into making, at the very least, our friends or our cohorts aware that, you know, any concerns, but also maybe constructive, positive feedback that they have, we'd be more than happy to listen to that, because at the end of the day, we sort of can take that to, as the video put it, the higher ups. So if you're in faculty council, you speak to, you know, the dean, the faculty board, and if you're in the university council, you're speaking to the executive board of UM. And in both cases, from my experience, they're all very interested in actually getting to know what the reality of students on the ground is. Yeah. So one is to sort of use that platform and make sure that even, you know, start small, like I said, start with your friends, make sure they know that you can represent them. And that is how you build faith in people's, you know, opinion of representatives.
Well, I would like to interrupt you about that, because obviously, you know, when you want to keep the opinions positive, I think transparency is very important. There's no real traceable progress at this time for students to figure out if promises from last year were fulfilled, because, for example, they can't access the code of conduct of last year. The manifesto, excuse me. And why is it not possible for students to see what kind of progress has been made, and, for example, not just that every promise that every party is making is just being repeated for the next year, because they can't really tell if it has been brought up before.
Yeah, so this has been a frequent dialogue at the council level, and whenever you bring it up at the council level, you know, one of the first things that's brought up by anyone, could be a staff or student, they'll say, you know, IBABs.
But I'm specifically talking about Khan, though.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I was going to come to that. In Khan's case, you can find our manifesto from last year on our website.
Okay.
I think most of the issues is how do you look at the manifesto and check whether those have been achieved this year. Apparently,
it is quite hard to find your manifesto of last year, though. It's not as easily navigatable on your website. That's actually very welcome criticism, and I'm happy to hear it today, because I haven't heard it before. But it's something that I can put forward to the board. Okay. Thanks. Okay, and then for Novum, how do you do things in terms of transparency?
So obviously transparency is something Novum are genuinely really serious about. There was the comment made about the frequency of Instagram posts.
Yeah.
You know, being very, very frequent near the election, not so frequent outside of it.
Yeah.
Novum have made a concerted, you know, strong effort within each council that are monthly, at least, there are updates of what has been happening in each council, what is being proposed, what has passed, and what Novum are currently working on. Because we think it's the bare minimum is knowing what we're doing. And what we strive for is people can have their own platform to speak with us about it. You know, whether that's giving ideas, giving criticism. I don't want this. I do want this. You know, that's something Novum are very, very, very strong with. You mentioned the manifesto thing for Khan. On the Novum website, you can go. It says Uni Council 2022-23, and then there's the current manifesto. But it's just one underneath it. You go, you have a look, and our manifesto is right there.
Okay.
We also make sure, or our candidates make an effort. For example, Charles de Groot, who's a university councillor this year, who's running again, has his Instagram page called Charles Politics, which he originally made to get elected, but kept going once he did, where he gives updates very, very frequently on what he's doing.
Okay.
I think, obviously, transparency starts with parties, but at the end of the day, it comes from individuals.
Yeah. So from the individual
and Novum encourage our individuals to be transparent. Yeah.
Okay, absolutely.
I see there's a red face there.
So for Khan, because apparently it is quite hard to find your former manifestos, could you explain to us where we would be able to find it in case people do want to check them out?
Oof. This is embarrassing. I haven't been on the website.
Could you actually maybe open the website and show us? That might be easier.
From what I remember, there's a page called Our Mission.
I'm hearing that that our mission is from this year and doesn't really include last year's points.
Because I recently checked this actually just to make sure whether it was still last year's manifesto. I will check again just to make sure because I'm the one who wrote a large part of it last year. You're right. Okay, it has been changed. So I'm assuming that's just a mistake that's come about because it's election time and we want to inform voters about our manifesto for this year. But ideally, and the way it has been in previous years, is that you can find the previous year's manifesto as well.
But isn't it important that it doesn't overlap with last year's, especially for the elections, so people know what exactly is happening? You would like to react?
I mean, what you've said, of course, is important, but of course, there's also the topic, of course, of how do you know whether something has been accomplished or whether there is still work to be done on a certain subject? I mean, topics can repeat if they still keep going. I mean, housing has been a problem for I don't know how many years, and it has kept popping up on manifestos because it is a problem that has to be addressed, so it keeps popping up.
Yeah.
And I think it is definitely good that council members in general are held accountable for the promises they make and that they make responsible promises. And that's, of course, a good thing. And on the other hand, it's also good to not see everything through one lens, that we're just repeating the same promises every single year.
Yes, that's absolutely true. The thing is that for Khan, I actually tried to go through the website and I couldn't find the page. When I do try to find last year's page, it just says that it's not available. So maybe that's something that you should figure out with the website itself, because if the page is not online, obviously there's like a bit more of a lack of transparency.
Yeah, and of course, to just add one more little thing onto it is probably also pretty hard to see whether something has actually been accomplished without actually knowing what is going on in the council.
Absolutely. We weren't able to find a manifesto for Lex from last year.
No, that's right.
How come? Because obviously you do care about this transparency.
Oh yeah, I definitely do. No, and I will be happy to supply those if that is, of course. I mean, I'm happy to disclose what has been promised over the last years, of
absolutely, course. But why isn't it just publicly available by default?
I think because it has not been thought of the way that you guys have brought it. I think it is not to trick voters into making the same promises, because that's not really the case with us. It's mainly because we want to don't create a distracting website, for example, where we have like 1,500 links and then you click on the wrong one and you're actually reading something else.
So you do care about the transparency,
yes.
But so you haven't thought of it in the way of
we have just not been
posting.
At least I have not been aware of transparency in this way.
Okay, but how do you?
Moving forward, I would publish.
No. But like so transparency when it comes to manifestos hasn't been there. But like, what other things have you done for transparency? Like, in what ways do you care about transparency in that case? What's the most important?
I mean, in general, I believe we have a lot of, for example, we have the, of course, student newspapers, for example, who are present during the council meetings, for example. They specifically know what promises have been made, and especially around, for example, election season, it would be very feasible, for example, for such people to perhaps publish.
Yeah, but then what I'm hearing then is it's actually the student newspapers who are gathering the information. It's not given freely by the parties themselves.
As has been said, like the meetings themselves are public, which is very easily to check whether a representative is actually meeting their promises.
Yes, and so just to get this clear, how do the meetings? What do the meetings have to do with that? Because
of
the
course,
information is going around even without the meetings.
Yeah, so I think one of the parts is, of course, in a manifesto, people need to make like actual realistic goals, promises, of course. You can't just wish that there is suddenly the Efteling in the backyard of university, of course. I think that is, of course, one part. And then the other part, I mean, the visibility there is. You've just brought this to my attention, of course, so I have not been aware in the past, but I would say that
I would
publishing manifestos would be indeed a very good point for parties.
I absolutely think it's just, in general, the responsibility for all of the parties to publish this information and make it publicly accessible and to have it accessible easily, because it is very important.
I would also add on to it, for example, making public the actual attendance of the council members within certain councils.
Sorry, Andrew, you're raising your hand. What would you like to say?
Well, I wanted to make a comment, one about, the transparency, but also, about this issue with the manifestos. Some may not be published, some may be published.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's the whole, reason we want transparency. Yes, Novum's manifesto is published, but the broader point is, we are still students. The University Council isn't a sacred board that can snap their fingers and get things done. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of progress. If you look at Novum's manifesto, there are things we did manage to implement, there are things we didn't.
Yeah.
We're being transparent about the things we didn't, but just like the fact we're not perfect, there are some things we weren't able to accomplish. I'd say the same about the members from Khan and from List Lex, whereas this not publishing the manifesto, again, it's like, it's a student party. It's not perfect.
Well, no, absolutely.
But it's good that I think as parties, we should all agree that this is something that should definitely happen from now on. It's these manifestos from previous years, whether it's 1 year ago, 2 years ago, they should be there.
Yeah.
They should be there.
Yeah. All right. Then I would like to leave this topic for what it is. Finally, I want to have an open floor so the candidates can ask questions to each other, and you will have 1 minute to answer. So we will have a timer again. I will let you know when time is running out. So if you have any questions, now would be the time.
I have a question for Khan. So you guys mentioned the success of SOS Maastricht. And first of all, I'd like to commend Khan for this initiative because helping 100 students find housing is great. You were talking about SOS Maastricht kind of in a past tense. I recently verified the website actually because I was curious, and the website is no longer up. Could Khan explain why that is the case?
So I mean, at the time, the entire platform and website was designed by these 3 students who are helming it, and since then, because its ownership of it has been transferred to Maastricht Housing, they were allowed to do.
So it hasn't been updated yet then, since the developments of the project?
It's more so, embarrassingly, I will have to admit that maybe our website was abandoned simply because it's legally not in our, it's not our possession anymore, so to speak.
I see. But isn't that important? Because obviously, if you would like to keep this program going and this initiative going, like, isn't it important to have a website that is always functioning? Like, I feel like maybe it should be something to look after because, as we discussed before, the housing situation is very, very important. So it would be even more important that students have access to this information all year round.
I agree, and I will work on figuring that out with Maastricht Housing right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Khan, do you have any questions for the other parties?
Yeah, I would pose this to both of you. How would you more, increasingly engage or include the municipality in the matters of students, be it housing, for example, and in general giving students a platform at the municipality, which often is the case at other student cities, say Leiden or Leuven in Belgium?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think this is certainly a question where my lack of experience as a councillor plays a part, and I'll be very openly honest about that. Me myself, on a personal level, have never had much interaction with the municipality. That is something that I know my party does do, and something that, if elected, I would definitely get more involved with. I know my party has candidates in common with Volt and parties like D66.
Yes,
and there is a lot
the
of
time is running low.
Oh,
so just
I forgot about the timer.
Yeah.
But no. Anyway, broadly speaking, the collaborations have to stay consistent, and especially with the municipality considering housing. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Then Lex, do you have any questions?
No questions really.
No questions. Then I would say you could also give your answer.
Okay, yeah, I mean, definitely, of course, within my position in the Faculty Council, I've not been in touch, of course, with the municipality either. I think in general, I mean, I know that there's at least a few students, I believe, who are also on the municipal board, municipal council, sorry. I think in general, reaching out not as on individual parties, but as the student...
Are you sure that you've got members in the municipal council?
I mean, I know at least from one who just graduated that is in the municipal council.
So they're still in the municipal council even though they graduated?
I think they might have just graduated. I don't know the specifics of their graduation, but I just know that they at least have still ties to the university and their members. I think that is the main point here, is that I think in general we all have at least one person to talk to within the council which you can address problems with or work with a solution, or at least get the appropriate people there. And I think that should not be a party thing. I think it should be something that all the student representatives should try and do, if not the council in general.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Time is running a bit low, so if you have any final questions to ask each other, I would say do it now, or forever hold your peace. Khan, yeah?
Sure, thank you. I'd like to pose this question to Novum, because Novum has, over the past few years, spoken a lot about putting sustainability on their manifesto and on the agenda. And Khan Party would like to ask you guys what your current ongoing projects focused on sustainability are and how you will improve on that.
So I can tell you clearly about what was done last year. And first of all, I'd like to commend Khan, because when it comes to raising awareness for sustainability issues, I don't think there's a party better. You know, it's in the name Climate Action Network. You guys do a fantastic job, and the marketing is fantastic too. Novum has gotten eco-friendly soap into the bathrooms. We have gotten recyclable toilet paper into the bathrooms.
Yeah.
And we have this consistent effort to try to make the university more sustainable.
Yeah.
And the main thing is it's going to be an ongoing battle. And I think the primary point is, especially with Khan, given sustainability, I would say is to an extent your guys' expertise and at least raising awareness about it. It's going to always be a concerted effort from all parties, because this is something we all believe in as far as I'm concerned. So if I can close off with a final comment, it's I really, really look forward, if elected, to working with each candidate, whether it's from here or Dope who didn't show up.
All right, thank you very much. Now, I would like to give a final thank you to all of the candidates for making it, and of course to our lovely viewers. Don't forget to vote at elections.maastrichtuniversity.nl. You have until Thursday at 6 p.m, so make sure you get on that.